Hey, hey, how are you guys? How's everybody doing? How's everybody feeling? Good? Yay. Wonder if you guys are feeling exhausted, excited, inspired, a little bit of everything. A little bit of everything. All of it. Yes, definitely inspired. That's great. Hey, Jordan.
Hey,
Hi.
Sonnet, good to see you.
It's great to see you. I'm going to spotlight you front and center here. Spotlight myself for our conversation. It's so nice to have you. Thanks for spending, lunch hour with the VIP group here with us today.
Yeah, sure, no problem. It's my pleasure. How's everything going today so far?
Yeah, it's been great. This is our day two. The conference is made up of all licensing agencies. And then VIP, we're just bringing in a little lunch meet and greet, chit chat, Q&A with some very special music supervisors. And so yeah, we're excited to sit down. So it's been great. We're just going
Awesome.
to be finishing it up. We have one more panel and that'll be 2 day back-to-back panels with some
Awesome.
phenomenal agencies. Yeah.
It sounds great. Yeah, I saw the lineup. Definitely looked like some great agencies in the mix. Definitely some people I've worked with before for sure. So
Yes.
always love to see it.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, great insights. A lot of talk about AI this year, inevitably, which is an inspired conversation. So, just to set expectations, I have to run at 2. I'm handing off the reins to Julianne. She will be here for technically just helping people as they ask questions. We'll have a little chat first, and then open it up for Q&A for the last 20 minutes. She'll be manning the Q&A. I have to go run and grab my kids, which is just what it is, life. So
Sure.
yeah, that's what will be happening. Just to set that at 2 o'clock, I will be running off. So let's start. We have people here who have never been on a call with us before, who haven't met you before, heard about Jordan and the amazing work that you do, and also awards that you're winning. So tell us a little bit about your musical journey and then what you've been working on, and I'm sure there's lots of questions that follow that. But congratulations on all of the amazing success you've been doing and
Oh,
travels of the world.
oh, thanks, Sonnet. I appreciate that. Yeah, so I'll try to nutshell it as best I can, not go
Well, we
too
have
far
a whole
back
hour
from.
together.
Um, yeah, I can talk a lot if I had to, though. So I'm from Iowa, which is a really random place to be from if you want to be a music supervisor or work in licensing or anything like that. So, I grew up in Iowa. I went to college there, and I got my start in college radio. That's kind of how I got my first introduction to anything like music and media related or anything like that. So I started at the station's as the station's DJ and music director. And then when I graduated, I moved to Minneapolis and worked at the station at a radio promotions company. It's kind of similar to Sync in some ways, where there's like two sides. Like there's the side of the gatekeeper who are actually programming music for the station, and there's the sides of like the promoters and the record labels and everyone's that are pitching albums to the station for airplay and charting and things like that. So when I was in college, I realized like, oh, there are people that get to do this for a living that actually, promote music to radio stations. So I ended up moving to Minneapolis and interning at a company that did this, and then shortly thereafter, actually getting hired from the company and running their specialty genre promotions department. And when I say hired, it's kind of a loose term. It's like I literally worked for commissions only, and I was really scrappy and hungry, and just kind of had to make everything work on a shoestring budget, which is a great approach to have because, as a lot of us know, even when you get more successful and get deeper into music supervision or licensing, there's not a lot of money to go around necessarily. So it's a good practice, it's a good training ground to just learn how to live, on very modest budget and things like that. But when I was there, I got to develop relationships with a lot of artists and labels and things like that. Some of the artists that I got to work with over the years were like Nappy Roots, Modest Yahoo, Coolio, Slum Village, people like that. I worked with a lot of hip hop music, so that was kind of my sweet spot in that area. But yeah, I ended up getting plenty of like number one albums on the college radio charts, which at the time was like CMJ or NACC, which is the new industry standard for that circuit. But through developing relationships with a lot of these artists and labels, I, wanted to start my own agency so I could start pitching music for Sync because that's really where I ultimately wanted to be. Like I wanted to be a music supervisor since I was like 20 or something like that. So again, when you come from Iowa, it's like you have to take a lot of little lateral moves and stuff to try and get closer and closer to it. So that was kind of it. I just started this company with this, relationships that I had. These artists and labels already trusted me from pitching their music and being successful at radio. So to ask them if I could pitch their music not exclusively for Sync, they were pretty on board. They didn't really have much to lose. So it kind of just took off from there. I started connecting with different music supervisors and pitching music. And, it took a long time, a lot of building up. And I was learning all of this stuff independently at the same time, too. I did a lot of research and just like reading books and listening to podcasts and following music supervisors on Twitter and like all this kind of stuff that I could do just to like learn as much about the process as I could. And, slowly at some point along the way, I started actually like getting some syncs and connecting with some more supervisors and like building those relationships and growing it out. And after doing that for like a few years, I got to the point where I was like, okay, I think I'm probably ready to move to LA because I know that's where this whole industry lives. And that's kind of where, if I'm going to have a bigger shot at it, that's going to be the most helpful thing. So I moved to LA about 7.5 years ago or something now. So that's how long I've been out here. And yeah, when I got here, I just kind of hit the ground running. I was still doing radio promo, but I was doing it remotely for the same company. Again, still commissions only. And then I was doing my sync stuff on the sides too. So I had kind of both of those going. And then I interned for a music supervisor. When I was actually out here, boots on the ground, I had the chance to actually try to make a transition to the other side. So I interned for a music supervisor who worked on a lot of like reality TV shows and some indie films and things like that. And it was cool. I learned a few things from doing that. It didn't ultimately lead to me getting hired or working for her or anything, but as much as anything, I kind of got to, peek behind the curtain and see how she was doing things. And it kind of just showed me that's like, wow, I think I know a little bit more about this than I thought that I did or that I give myself credit for. There's a lot of times where it's like you don't know what you don't know, until you get exposed to certain aspects of it. So, after doing that, I was like, you know what? I think I kind of just want to go out and try and do this on my own. Like I'm tired of like applying for internships or entry level jobs or whatever, waiting for someone to give me an opportunity. So I'd rather just go out and try to do it myself. So at that point, I just decided to go out and try to connect with different indie filmmakers and content producers and like anyone who is making something that could use help with music on their project. And I eventually connected with some guy that was making this super indie low budget horror film. But he had a general idea for kind of what he wanted and had a small budget in mind. So I worked with him and ended up supervising his film, and that was my first screen credit as a music supervisor. And then from there, it just kind of led to, referrals to, one of his other filmmaking friends and then, other people. And, I definitely, it's interesting because a lot of times as a music supervisor, you kind of have to approach it similar to the way a lot of like artists and, indie music reps and things do. It's like you do a lot of research on different filmmakers or different production companies or whoever and do research on who they are and what they do and then reach out to them in a very like well-tailored kind of way saying, hey, I really like your project. I saw this is what I liked about it. This is a little bit about me and what I do. If you ever need help with music on one of your projects or something, I'd love to be on your radar. It's like that same kind of thing that people take
Mm-hmm.
with terms of outreach and sort of like cold calling or cold approaching someone, but in a way that's most likely to actually have some success. So yeah, it kind of just took off from there and started getting more credits and building relationships with more and more people. And then, fast forward a little bit and I landed Love Island, back in like, what, I don't even know. I've done 4 seasons of the show at this point. I don't know if that was like 3 or 4 years ago or something like that, but that was definitely the kind of thing that it took off a little bit more in that way, just because it's a really popular show.
Mm-hmm.
It's very well known for the music and things like that. And that led to, me being able to get, nominated for some awards and, definitely, a little bit more of a higher profile kind of a thing with a hit show like that. So, yeah, I've been music supervising shortly after I got to LA, like 7.5 years ago, like I said. And those are kind of the steps and things that along the way that got me here. So I hope I didn't give too long-winded of a version of my
No,
story there.
no, it was so good. I mean, every time we talk, I'm always um reminded and just affirmed like you've always been like creating opportunity for yourself by showing up. What do I want? How do I show up? How do I find that opportunity? Like how do I do the research and how do I reach out to the right person and just like make yourself like 110% available and present for the opportunities when they come. And you've really like show that in all of the experience from the radio to music supervision to, you know, the high profile show, and how things have progressed so quickly. You know, you've been on that show for like 4 years, and that means, you know, you're only in LA for like three and a half. So things just like because of the way that you show up and the way that you like know the people you're working with and the music that you're working for with and all of those things. So I'm sure that people are going to have questions about the show because that also feels like, you know, it's a popular show. It gets lots of different press for all the different reasons. And you've been on location for all of those shows, or at least for the last number of them, right?
Past few I have. So the first time I did the show was in season 4, and that's when it made the transition from CBS to Peacock. So the first 3 seasons were on CBS. Things ran a little bit differently at that point. I wasn't on for any of those, but obviously I've worked with a lot of people that are. And then season 4, the show moved to Peacock for the first time. Just picked up by a different network. So at that point, we were actually local for season 4. It's like, you know, the show was shot in California, somewhere in the Santa Barbara area.
Mm-hmm.
That's where the villa was and where everything in physical production was. But then post was all in Burbank. So,
Okay.
you know, we all worked as locals and slept in our own beds every night and kind of got to have some sense of normalcy and things that season. But season 5 and ever since they've kind of taken everything to Fiji. So over there, it's like that's where everything is shot, and that's where post production is too. So me being in the post department, I mean, I'm out there with all the editors and producers and everything. Just for anyone that doesn't know, the show is very fast paced in the way that it's produced and released. Like it's almost like being as close to being like live as a reality show can be, where it's like everything is shot in real time and it's edited overnight and the episode is delivered like the next day. So it's a really, really fast turnaround in terms of how it's produced, and it's a high volume show too. I mean, we deliver like 36 episodes over the course of the summer. It's like 6 episodes a day for
Insane.
6 weeks in the summer. Yeah, it's crazy. It's a lot of work. It's very exhausting and it's pretty crazy. But that's part of why they want to have post and everything over there in person too. I mean, that's not the only reason but that's part of it for sure.
Right, right. That makes sense. So, well, I mean, in terms of like music, you have to well, you tell us, if you're working, if the show is shot and then it's edited overnight and then it's set, you know, aired the next day, like music comes in here and you don't have, you know, 3 hours to clear a song, like how you have to like have all this pre-work done so that you know what you can even put in there, right? Or can you explain a little bit how you like even get on top of something like that if it has to be so fast?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So like everything is pre-cleared as far as the music rights go. And that basically means that people give us approvals to use it on the basis of what the show is without getting a scene description. You know, on a
Mm-hmm.
lot of productions that have more time to work with, they'll actually submit a scene description for, you know, the approval of the rights holders to actually say like this is how the music is being used and the context of what it is. For us, we'll send like a synopsis of the show in general, but we're not going to be able to say exactly how the music is used because there's no time for that, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And we do get denials from some of the bigger artists, you know, like the Taylor Swift and MGKs of the world and things like that. It's like some of them just have hard rules. That's like we don't approve without scene descriptions. It's just not something that they do. It's not a precedent that they want set, or they just want more control over the way their music is used.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll get some restrictions from certain artists too, where it's like can't be used in any scene that contains, you know, sex or R-rated content or this, that, or the other thing or whatever it is. So that's part of it too. But yeah, I mean everything is pre-cleared and it's all on an MFN basis too. So it's basically all, MFN, similar timings and uses. So how long the song is used for will dictate what the fee ends up being. And it's a high volume approach to the music clearance too. I mean, there's a lot of songs that are in the mix, pre-cleared, of course, like I said. And once we have like a rough cut of an episode that comes in, it just starts the process of like trying to place different songs and, you know, um, trying to make it work as much as possible. And for me too, it's like tracking the budget is a big part of that too, because as we have so many songs dropping into the episodes and the feed is dictated by the amount that it's used for and things like that. Um, tracking how that's coming together is a big part of it too, because it's really easy to go over budget if you're just dropping songs everywhere, and you're not being conscious of that.
So interesting. So it's like you're the legal department, you are the finance department, and you are the creative department because you have to, not that they don't have those departments already, they do, but like in terms of this one umbrella, you have to kind of keep track of your what is cleared, keep track, make sure things are cleared, make sure that like the budget it's all adding up and that the music fits what is like being edited to too.
Yeah, I definitely work very closely with all those other departments. I mean, to
Yeah,
say a lot of these things, it's like, I don't want to take too much credit for anything because there
right.
is a whole village of people that work on this show, even for the music specifically. I mean, like
Right,
I'm
right.
one of a few music supervisors that work on the show all at the same time. I'm the only one that actually goes out to Fiji and is on location, but we have a
Oh wow.
couple other people that work on the show too, mostly doing the clearances. There's a music PA. There's another, music manager who does some of the library swaps and things like that. There's a legal department. There's, a lot of producers that do a lot of the creative picking, or a lot of the creative work and actually picking which songs are going into scenes and things like that. Editors
Oh
too.
wow.
So there's really a whole massive team of people. There's a lot of cooks in that kitchen, and I'm just one of them.
Yeah, that's so fascinating to hear. Yeah, and that makes sense that it takes that many that yeah, that many team members to create something in such a fast pace time.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's really kind of like an assembly line or something that the way the show is made. Because, like I
Right.
said, it's literally like as soon as something is shot, it's like there are loggers that are going through and tracking all the footage, and then there are story producers that start assembling these little bits, and then there's like the stitch team that starts like arranging the different acts within the scene, and then the finished producers come in and actually start fine tuning everything, and it goes through a couple network screenings
Wow.
throughout the day. It's like there's literally people working on the show 24/7. And I mean, there's like 2 dozen editors that work on an episode, throughout the course of a day, where it's literally like, the night shift and the day shift and a bunch of things in between, where it's like, oh,
Wow.
people, the finished team is working on one episode where the next team is coming in at some point during their shift and starting on the next one. And it's kind of a crazy system, the way that it works out and the way that it comes together. But it's the show's going into season 8 at this point. So I mean, they've got a formula that's fairly well established, and it's become a bit more of a well-oiled machine at this point. But I'm glad that they worked out a lot more of the kinks in season 1 and season 2 just to figure out how a lot of this works.
Yeah, wow, it's phenomenal to hear because you think like, oh well, a television show or reality show or a film, like it all is different. Like you can group it in, but even within that, there's so many variations to it, and your adaptability to it as a music supervisor, like you said. Also, we can talk about the timeline and how working on a film differs drastically to that workflow that is this sort of reality television show on location. Can you kind of give us like what were your time frames that you were working on when you were doing the film on films?
Yeah, totally. And it's so much of it is just case by case. It's like on a
Mm-hmm.
per project basis. There are sometimes, and ideally, a filmmaker would bring you on like in pre-production, before they actually start shooting to read the script and actually see if there are any like on camera uses or if there's anything with, any music related issues that are actually going to be like tied to picture and that they're actually going to shoot to. And that could be anything. That could be like a band that's playing, a show at a bar in a scene, or it could be someone performing an instrument of any other kind, or someone who's
Mm,
like even whistling or humming a melody or singing lyrics or anything like that. I mean, there can be a lot of different things, whether
Oh,
they're
interesting. Yeah.
performed or whether they're more like a diegetic use that in some way is going to be tied to the actual filming rather than added in post. Because if something is shot and it's not cleared, like it's much harder to fix it or change it at that point. So, and that unfortunately in like indie films and stuff like that, where people that don't have as much experience, they're like, oh, we'll just go out and shoot it and we'll figure it out later. And then they
Mm,
have some super expensive song or something that's not clearable that is been shot and is in the picture, and now it's a much bigger problem to solve. So that's ideally why it's best to bring a music supervisor on sooner rather than later. But a lot of times that does happen where you're not brought in until the 11th hour of post production and you have a bunch of messes to clean up. And, being on a cleanup job like that is not uncommon at all. Where, again, like people sadly tend to think about music very late stage because they feel like it's just a problem that they can figure out later or whatever. And then, yeah, you're brought in to clean up a lot of messes. And they're like, oh, well, we have this deadline we want to hit. So we've got like a month to try and get this done. And like obviously that's not realistic. So you always have to have a lot of discussions about expectations and how long things actually take and how much music actually costs and what goes into clearances and approvals and things like that. So there's always a lot of that comes down to it. But I wish I could give a better answer of like more definitively of what a timeline looks like, but so much of it is really just case by case. But I'll say there are a lot of times too where, I will be on a film for like a year or two or something like that. It's a much longer project, and especially on indies, it's like, people have very strong creative visions, and a lot of times they don't have an actual legit studio or production company that's really hounding after them to get it delivered so they can start, recouping some of their money and things like that. So it's not uncommon to have like a director or some other filmmaker who's just like tweaking the edit and tweaking it and tweaking it and tweaking it until like a year later has gone by and they're still like making adjustments and revisions and things like that. Much like a lot of artists and musicians will do with their songs too. It's like
right.
that's part of the creative process and some of the dilemmas and challenges that creative types come across for sure. Um, but yeah, so because of that, it can make the timeline very, very different for sure. But it is a lot more common to have much more time to work with in terms of sourcing music and trying different things out and clearing things. And it's much, and we don't, you're not gonna pre-clear things the same way that you would on a show like Love Island. It's like you'll actually get a scene description and a much more, specific and concise description of how it's being used and things like that.
Yeah. And I wanted to just go more into detail. And one of the things that you mentioned a little while back was, even these moments like when somebody's humming a song or they turn on the radio or there like any mention, any musical thing that is just kind of written in or happens accidentally, like you hear these, stories where, oh, and then somebody just broke into song and or the music supervisor's like, I have to go and clear that now. Like we have to, all of that is
Yeah.
also under your scope, not just finding songs and making sure that, the scene is being supported by the right music.
100% for sure. I know it's like I feel like there are a lot of like, younger people that want to get into the craft and be like, oh, I just love picking songs and
Yeah.
putting songs and music and TV and like it's cool. And like, that's a much smaller part of it than a lot of people realize. It's like you think that's what it's going to be, but it's actually like doing public domain research on the ice cream truck song or something like that.
Right. You're like, oh, and what do I do with this? And yeah. It's so interesting. It's fascinating. It's just like this deep dive and every, like you said, every situation is different. So it's not like because now you know about the ice cream truck, the next time it'll be some other thing that, you'll be
Totally.
down a deep dive.
100%. Yeah, and it's like it can be so many different things too. Because like there are some, music supervisors that really specialize in like a technical side of things. Like if they have to do like a musical, for example, or a project that has a very music-driven script. If it's like a biopic about like, a legacy artist or something like that. Like there's usually going to be a ton of on-camera performances and things like that. So they usually have to be, do a lot of pre-records where they get the actors in the studio to actually record, versions of the song that are then going to be played back playback on set, and they have to make sure that the playback is all in sync, and then oversee that in post as well. And like that's a very technical, role for sure. So music supervision can look like that sometimes. I mean, there are some projects that use a lot of like original music. If they're like, we want to have a great soundtrack of original songs that have been written for a project, then it's like, okay, they need to go out to their vast network of different, artists and music reps and people like that to try to make original, music, and maybe write a lot of briefs for that or give notes and just tap into a lot of aspects of like deal making and sort of A&Ring in some kind of way, to actually have a lot of original music that's written. Yeah, there can be some, projects that are very period based, where it's like, oh, this is going to be set in the 1950s, so we want a lot of authentic 50s music, and things that are set in different, locations and cultures and things like that. It's not definitely not uncommon to have a project that's like, oh, we're going to use a bunch of like, music from a particular country or something like that. So having to source a lot of those. And again, all of this stuff can include a lot of aspects of like, rights research, could be public domain stuff. It could be just convoluted copyright situations. I mean, there's so many different roles and so many different like tasks and things that can fall under the scope of what music supervision is, so again, it's all project by project, depending on what it is creatively, depending on the budget, depending on the vision of the production and the people that are in charge of making it and actually making the decisions on what it's going to sound and feel like. So like, yeah, there's really so many aspects to it for sure. I could go on and on about it, but I'll go ahead and stop there.
Well, I mean, it's fascinating work, and it really, I think, is so helpful for people to understand who are not the music supervisors, but adjacent to they're creating the music, or they want to be a part of the ecosystem, to understand what everybody's role is and all the different hats that you wear, so that they can better support you with the way that they work. On that note, this conference is all about music licensing agencies and like having your music represented so that somebody like you can use it. Can you speak to, I guess, speak to that a bit in terms of like you do also represent music, which I'd love to talk about more, but then also you work with agencies, or why do you choose that over fielding 100,000 emails directly from the artists?
Yeah, I mean, there's several reasons for
I don't want to
sure.
answer it for you, but
Yeah, yeah, no, totally. And I mean, everyone's probably heard this before a lot. I don't really have like a unique or a different answer for this in any kind of
but I don't
way,
know if
but
everybody has.
ultimately,
Because we have a lot of
yeah.
people here who maybe haven't. Who like I
Okay,
don't think we've
nice.
actually connected those dots yet. Like, why do you want to get your music represented?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of ways. The first and foremost, like it just comes down to like trust and relationships. Like this is a relationships industry, period. Like that's the way music and entertainment, all of them are for sure. Whether you're an actor or back when I was in radio promo, it's the same way. I mean, this is like relationships are really everything in music and in entertainment. So, um, trust is a pretty vital part of that for sure. So I'm going to trust someone that I've worked with for several years, that I've known, that I know that they know what they're doing and that they understand the rules of like what you can and can't do with music licensing, and that whatever they're representing has been vetted and there's not going to be any clearance issues, or there's not going to be something that comes back to bite us down the line, if I just get a cold email from some random artist, like I don't know if this music has samples in it, or if it's got interpolations, or if there's some like secret writer that they never told us about, or there could be any number of things. And I say
Right.
this to a lot of like the productions that hire me as a music supervisor too, is like music licensing is a minefield. Like there's so many different ways to get burned and so many different things to look out for, that if you don't really know what you're doing, or if you don't have experience doing it, like there's a lot of problems that could come up. So that's why it's helpful for a production to hire an experienced music supervisor to help with that. And why it's also important for music supervisors to work with trusted sources to
Mm-hmm.
help and make sure that everything has been, buttoned up and everything is okay. And at the end, because at the end of the day, it's like if I bring someone into the mix and kind of vouch for them, it's like I'm really sticking my neck out for them. And like I'm not going to
Yeah.
do that with someone unless I really trust them, unless I really know them, because there can be a lot of liability that goes along with this. If there's an issue, suddenly, the production company or whoever is hit with a lawsuit, and everyone is going to be looking at like how did this happen and who's to blame for it and all that kind of stuff. So it is, there can be some high stakes around some of this stuff for sure. So that's why, trust and reputation and everything like that is really important going through a company that is established, that has experience doing this, and all of that good stuff. So that's the first thing, first and foremost. I mean, I guess
I'm
another thing
gonna
that goes
just
along with,
hold on one sec,
yeah, yeah,
because
sure.
I feel like this is such an important conversation. I don't want to end in the. I don't want to jump off and distract everybody. So I'm gonna hand it over to Julianne so that I can pop off and then continue this, because this we haven't dived into this, and I know we have new people in here, and hearing from the music supervisor, like, why do you go to agencies, and also hearing how high those stakes are. It's not just like, oh my gosh, love your music, I'll put it in here. Like the stakes, the pressure is high. Okay, I'm gonna make you the host, and I'm gonna pop off. And I'm sorry to leave in the middle
No
of.
worries. Yeah,
Okay.
thanks, Sonia. It's good to see you.
Yeah, it's great to see you, and I'll see you soon.
Awesome. Have a good weekend.
Yes, you
Thanks.
too.
Okay, so just to carry on, I guess, that's the first reason. Another aspect too is like, I mean, goes along with this too. A lot of these companies and agencies and stuff, they have insurance as well. So like, if there was a claim, or if there was a copy, or a lawsuit or something that happened as a result of some degree of copyright infringement, a lot of these companies will have E&O insurance. So it's like if there's something that they have to cover, the insurance can actually pay for the damages and the attorney's fees and things like that. Where, if you were licensing a song from an independent artist who has no insurance and no money, like if they were on the hook for some expensive lawsuit, they probably wouldn't have the means to actually, indemnify the production company and actually make good on that. And that's just a thing to look out for. I mean, it's pretty standard in any license agreement is like indemnification. If you don't know what that is, like look into it, do some research. It's a good way just to get an idea of what you're actually agreeing to when you sign over a license. Is like a lot of times what you'll see is like you as the, hypothetically, if you were licensing a song directly to a production company, you would be the licensee or no, sorry, you would be the licensor and they would be the licensee, and you as the licensor would be indemnifying them from any claims or damages related to your ownership of the song. So again, it's just good to get an understanding of what that is, so you know kind of what you're agreeing to, when you sign over a license like this. So
Yeah,
yeah,
and
a lot of the, yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say, there's a question in the chat about, speaking of that insurance, should we as indie artists have a version of that? And my understanding is that's like exorbitantly expensive. Do you have anything to say about that? Like, should indie artists be worried about getting insurance like this? Or is
It
that
dep-
just,
I think it depends who you're pitching and who you're going to, or like what your goals kind of are. Like, for a lot of like lower end sinks, things like, you know, reality TV or indie films, which I work on and things like that, they're going to be a lot like less strict about that kind of stuff. There's going to be a lower barrier to entry because the fees are on the lower end anyway. When you're going for something like that, they can only be kind of so picky about who they work with and things like that. Is it better? Does it still help to know that that's in place? Sure, absolutely, but it's not necessarily a requirement. That said, if you're going for bigger spots, like, a big ad that pays, mid 5 or 6 figures or something like that, a lot of times, like more legit ad agencies and things like that, it's like, it's a non-starter. Like if you don't have, an insurance policy in place, like they won't even consider it for sure. Because those are, high fees like that. It's, extra high stakes for sure. So it kind of depends again, case by case, about like who you're pursuing and what you're going after and things like that. And it's not something I would recommend just getting in place from the start. If you're kind of at the ground floor and you're trying to get your first couple syncs, I wouldn't worry about getting insurance policy in place prior to that. At some points it's like walk before you run, and if you do end up doing really well and racking up a bunch of syncs, and then you want to start going for some of the more premium, higher paid ones, then like, yeah, maybe at that point, it makes more sense. And at that point, it's probably going to be more financially viable for you too. Otherwise, if you sign with an agency that has the insurance in place, then they'll have that on your behalf, and you don't need to get your own policy if that's the case. Um, Other than that, like, Yeah, I mean, I think it's good. Again, just stay right sized and take it a little bit at a time, you know. As far as it being expensive and stuff, there are a couple different companies I know that offer it, or have talked about it. There's one that I've heard of that's fairly reasonable in cost. Actually, a lot less than I thought it was going to be, but I would also make sure that you have a good conversation with them, maybe even consult with a lawyer to make sure that, like, hey, this also covers, issues of copyright infringement or other things like that, just to make sure that that's what it is. But yeah, either way, I mean, errors and omissions insurance in general is just something that like any small business will often have. It's not something that's unique or specific to this industry. It's, just something that's general liability insurance that anyone in business could potentially have in place to protect themselves from any kind of issue that could happen.
Cool. All right. Well, I'm gonna
Yeah.
if anyone else has questions, I'll let them. First, I want to offer our collective condolence to you for having to work in Fiji. That's
Mm,
that that must be just terrible. I'm kidding. I'm in Pittsburgh, so the weather. Anyway, um,
nice.
I have real quick, and people, you can just probably unmute if you have a question, but I have one. Do you have a favorite song to picture moment, either as a professional making the connection or as a consumer?
Ooh, that's a good question, and it's one that's hard to answer on the spot. I don't actually really know.
It's okay, no
Mm,
pressure.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'll say one thing that I've liked a lot that happened. This was on Love Island like a few seasons ago. Um, I'll just say these are just a couple of scenes that were favorites or standouts for me. We used the song Melody by Sagala in this, like, in the finale of Love Island season 5. It's sort of this, like, they call it this the story of the season, where it's this kind of like, a 3 or 4 minute montage. It's kind of like recapping everything that happened on that season leading up to the finale. So that was definitely a standout scene that I like a lot. Um, Season 6 in Love Island, there was a song "On My Knees" by Rufus Du Sol that was used, just in this really cool, like, dramatic sort of moment where one of the guys was kind of sneaking around behind the other girl's back, and she caught him red-handed and found out about it, and then they were talking. Typical, like, sort of story plot or whatever. But getting to use that song was really cool, I thought. So, yeah, those were just a couple that stood out to me, I guess.
Awesome, awesome. And Joe, I see you got your hands raised. Do you want to unmute? Oops, try and unmute again here. There you
Jordan, thanks again for doing this. It's really like valuable information just to kind of see what's going on. And I love your story as well. So I grew up in the woods of Maine and then got into radio as well. On the flip side, I was
Thanks.
on air and programming, and now I make music. So
That's
um,
awesome.
one of the questions I have is, so I had a song synced in Love Island, Malta. The singer I
Mm.
worked with is from Malta. She's like a championship beatboxer there. So they heard us on the radio and came to us for that. How would someone like me go about getting something to you where it's not just like, random unsolicited submission?
Yeah, it's funny that you say that because there actually are a lot of different iterations of Love Island that happen all across the country or across the world. I heard somewhere that, like, there's something like 20 or a couple dozen different iterations of it across the globe. Like, it's basically a format that, like, the production company sort of like franchises out to different, production companies in different territories and stuff like that. Like, yeah, there's like Love Island Malta and Love Island Spain and Love Island South Africa and Love Island Romania and all this stuff, and it's pretty crazy. But UK and the USA are definitely the two biggest ones for sure. So that's cool that you got on Love Island Malta. I mean, congrats for sure.
Thanks.
I mean, as far as getting music to us for any consideration on that regard, I mean, the best way to do it for sure is to find representation for sure. Like I said at the beginning of the call, like, a couple of the companies that have been here and spoken as part of this event this week or this weekend or whenever, are companies that we've worked with before, that we've licensed their music that they've pitched to us for the show. So getting representation is definitely the best way, I would say, for sure, especially if there are companies like that have a relationship already in place for sure. I think that's one of the smartest approaches to take with licensing your music in general and trying to, like, align yourself in the best way possible is, like, think about productions or different shows or whatever that are out there that your music would be a good fit for. You know, like for Love Island, it's a lot of like just straight up pop music, you know. So it's like if that's the kind of stuff that you make, you know, that's an avenue. Or any other reality show that uses a lot of different pop music, or anywhere else that, you know, the music you make is sort of in the format of the musical sound and style of the show. And then yeah, see, you know, who the music supervisors are, see what artists they've licensed before, see what companies represent those artists, you know, and then see if you can find a way to make a connection with those companies and have them represent your music. I mean, that's definitely one good approach to take, I think. And it's definitely more hands-on too, because you're doing a lot more initiative and research to actually try to like put yourself on that track and actually put yourself in the channel to be in the place that's going to be most likely to be effective for you. And yeah, I mean, if you approach a company, sync agency or whoever that you think you'd be a good fit for, and you've done all this research, tell that to them for sure. Be like, hey, like I saw that you represent these other artists and that you've licensed their music for this show. I think my show would be my music would be a great fit for that show as too. Too, I'd love to connect with you. I mean, again, it shows that you've done your research and that there is a clear connection there. And I think that they're going to be, you know, a lot more receptive to that than if it's just some generic cookie cutter kind of email or something like that, you know.
No, absolutely. Are there any companies in particular you just really enjoy working with, especially for like the Segala type music?
I mean, I feel kind of bad because I don't want to shout out too many like
Yeah, not to put you
you
on the
know
spot and get you in
too
trouble.
many like yeah, I just don't want like anyone to feel slighted because I didn't get mentioned or anything. But I mean, some of the companies that like I think some of the people that I saw, and I'm kind of drawing a blank. I didn't look at it recently, but some of the companies that like that were part of this event today, I think were like in Style Music. I mean, we worked with them before a couple times. I think I don't know. So Glow Music was there, but we've worked with them, but not directly. They were, you know, their some of their songs were repped by another company called Groove Garden, you know, that we've worked with before. I mean, there are some of the bigger sync agencies like Lyric House or Position Music or Silverside, which you know, we've all which have been long-standing relationships as well. I mean, I don't know. I feel like it's hard to just think on the spot necessarily and come up with a lot of them, but those are a handful that I would shout out for sure.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks, Joe.
All right, cool. So it looks like Gilbert, you've got your hand up next. Do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Hello. Is my microphone working well? Yeah.
We can hear you.
Hi. I'm actually from Malta, so to add to the conversation, yeah, I'm all the way from Malta. So
It's awesome.
nice to meet you, and thank you so much for the tips that you're sharing. It's really interesting. To add to the question that maybe Joe was speaking about, what I wanted to ask is normally when people like pitch for Love Island, you would prefer working with some companies rather than people approaching you.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, that's always like the preferred method, you know, especially just because we know these companies, we have established, you know, relationships with them, you know, kind of going back to like the trust aspect and everything else that's a part of it. That's pretty crucial. And the other thing too is that like, I mean, and this I'll kind of loop this back to the initial question too about why it's helpful to work with companies and everything, because I didn't, you know, fully elaborate on all that too. But the other aspect is that like they can pitch, you know, a playlist of a bunch of different artists and things like that too. Where if I go to every artist, they're just going to pitch only their own stuff, you know. And it is better to get a more diverse palette of different things in the mix and different you know, sound styles, artists, and things like that. The other thing too is like there's not an inherent bias that's there. It's definitely a more neutral perspective. I mean, obviously, if someone's rapping music, there's still some bias that's there, but it's a lot less than an artist pitching their own music. I mean, people have different hot takes on this too. I've definitely encountered people that are like, it's bad practice to pitch your own music because there are some people that do, they're an artist, but they also have a company, or they're an artist, but they also work at a company. And there are different opinions about like, if you do that, you shouldn't pitch your own music. I don't think that that's necessarily bad practice or anything, although I've heard some people, share that opinion. But either way, if you are pitching your own music, you're going to be about as biased as someone can possibly be. And I've definitely seen that plenty of times too, with artists pitch their own music and be like, "Oh, it'd be perfect for this spot. It'd be great." And it's like, no, it's not. Like it's not what we're asking for, but you're trying to make it work anyway because you want the sync, right? I mean, it's one of those things where it's like the bias exists in a pretty major way, whether you're aware of it or fully conscious of it or not. So, I mean, that's another aspect too of why sometimes people prefer to have their music, pitched through agencies and music reps rather than going to it themselves, for sure. And the other thing too that I'll just say for this show in particular, it's like it's just such a high volume show. We get thousands and thousands of different, songs in the mix. Some of them, a lot of them are pitched to us. Some of them are ones that our producers, just go out and find because we work with a lot of popular music. So much of like pretty much anything is potentially on the table when that's the case. So, they scour Spotify and they, have their own musical repertoires of their own artists that they know and like and all these things, and they make a lot of requests like that too. So there's just so much stuff that's in the mix. And for us, again, to get a playlist pitched to us, because we just have a grid where we save all these different playlists that are pitched to us, and to have that grid which we can kind of go and run back to and look at, that has playlists that have pitched by companies we know with a bunch of different artists and everything. It's helpful to have it formatted in that way. We're trying to save playlists from every individual artist that's pitched stuff to us. It's just going to get really big and really messy really fast. So yeah, I mean, I think that those are some of the main reasons that to go along with that. So I guess to answer your question, ultimately, like yeah, it's always preferred or better, for us for this show in particular, at least, to go through an agency rather than to pitch directly as an artist. That said, to one little aspect of hope with some of this too. It's like on some of the indie films and stuff that I work, I'm a lot more open and likely to go with artists directly because the fees are very low to begin with. In indie films, like finding the budget is always a challenge. And if I'm able to go to an indie artist and I know that they're hungry and that they want to get syncs and there's someone that I've met and I trust them a little bit more, there'll be enough trust there where I'm willing to do it. And I know that they're also going to be more likely to be able to work with the fee range because when you license music yourself, you get all the fee. You don't have to split it with an agency and pay them a commission the way that you would otherwise. So when that's the case, it's like there's a little bit more to go around, and people can be a bit more flexible from that stance, I think. So in terms of licensing music directly as an artist, I think a route like that is definitely something that's a little bit more reasonable, and definitely something I think it's good to be open to for sure.
Makes and to add as well, thank you for that. When selecting music, would you want to choose music that is either breaking an artist or just sync friendly music? Because so far I feel I'm quite divided in what agencies would actually want. If it's
Yeah,
like
that's
an artist sound or just something which is a bit more generic.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely open ended. I think for me personally, I would rather break, a cool artist, someone that has, a lot of authenticity and like a cool backstory and everything like that, because that's my background and that's what I came from. Working in radio promo and everything like that. It's all about, finding authentic artists that are actually active in a more traditional sense of, this 360 approach of like recording albums and touring and generating a fan base and all that stuff that more traditional musicians would do. I'm definitely more interested in that. That said, it's not really about what I want personally. It's a lot more about what serves the story and what works for the picture and what a lot of the editors and producers ultimately want to do. And that said, a lot of people will say that they like that too, but then when it comes down to it, when we're actually getting a bunch of songs in the mix, it may or may not be the case. Because sometimes like the music has to, I mean, people are going to look at the music at face value first and foremost, regardless, no matter what. Even if we think like, oh, this artist is super authentic or they have a great backstory or they're we have a chance of helping them break out in some kind of way. Like if it doesn't serve the story, if it doesn't fit to picture, if it doesn't do the things we need it to do, none of that really matters anyway, you know? So it's like that has to be first and foremost. And I think the other stuff is more of like, you know, an added bonus or a cherry on top or whatever you want to call it for sure. And people have different approaches about that. For me personally, I do like to hear a good backstory and I do like to hear some measure of like authenticity and actual like, you know, building of presence and fan base and things like that as part of the consideration. Some people don't care at all. And they're like, you know what, we just want some stuff that sounds good and works, and that's it. That said, just from a purely writing and producing approach and everything, I would always try to be as authentic as you can, for sure. I mean, if you're trying too hard to tailor your sound and your style to be too sync friendly or with that too much top of mind, it's probably just going to sound kind of generic. You know, it's like at the end of the day, there's so many library songs and production music tracks that, you know, if you try too hard to stay in that lane, you know, you don't want to like sell your soul as part of the process, you know?
Cool. All
Thank
right. And
you.
we're going to have to close it off here so we can get out of the way before the next session. But real quick, you can do a yes or no, because I see in the chat some people are asking, do you work with Crucial music?
I know who they are. I've not worked with them before. I mean, Crucial's a
Okay.
library, not a sync agency,
Yeah,
so it's kind of
right.
a different model, but yeah, they're not someone I've worked with personally.
All right, cool. Well, hey, everyone, help me thank Jordan for being here today. We really appreciate it. It's especially nice. We've heard from a lot of sync agents, so it's nice to get some view from the other side as supervisor. So thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I love talking about this stuff, so I
Yeah.
super appreciate it. It's good to meet all you today for sure. Hope that it's been a good couple days of you know, sessions and networking and everything for you, and wish you all the best of luck for sure.
All right, so fun. Thank you so much. All right, everybody, I'm
Thanks.
going to close this out and then we'll see you all back at the half hour. All right, thanks for putting up with the substitute sonnet for the end. See you around.